come once again to discuss things.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I'm Sid2. Joining me today is...
Geek for fun.
I'm that Matt kid.
And today we're discussing kind of a vague topic. This is one of those things that'll probably get a little bit more fleshed out and we'll have like an actual title for somewhere in the video. But, you know, the general gist of what I want to get into today is like takes on a character. Why certain takes stick, why other takes don't work, just that general feel. And this is something that's mainly going to be for comic book characters because they have such a longevity to them that there's room for the multiple interpretations. You can't really do a take on a character who only has, one movie or one novel or something. There's no real, like, I don't know, there's no The Bride from Kill Bill take because there's only the one thing. You kind of need that multimedia, multiple iterations kind of thing to get multiple character takes. But, yeah. It's just something that's kind of been on my head because I've been thinking about the way that people interpret characters, the way people view characters, and I don't know, just something that's kicking around in there. Do you guys have any starting opinions, any hot takes on character takes?
I've got some. I was thinking about this literally today as I was driving to go pick up my after work Jimmy John's. I was thinking about this and I was like, how do we even define what makes a take, right? And so I'm just like, it's got to, like, we got to define our terms here. And so I'm thinking, like, you have like a version of the character that's kind of the center, that's kind of what everyone culturally thinks of that character. And it's not even necessarily what that character started out as, it's just whatever the current culture at large thinks of that character. And then a take is just how far away from that do we get. And I was thinking about, like, if you look at, like, Joker, for example, if you look at, like, 80s to 90s, like, killing joke but maybe less monologue-y, just kind of your typical Joker, then, like, Jack Nicholson's Joker is not really a take. He's just kind of Joker. Like, he's just the Joker. And then you get to Heath Ledger's Joker. It's like, it's kind of a take because you're taking one aspect of the character, the, like, Agent of Chaos thing, and you're kind of bringing that more to the forefront. And then you get to Jared Leto's Joker, and you're like, okay, that's a take. So, like, it's like you almost have to find, like, what is kind of the accepted thing about this character, and then how far away can you get from that while still calling it the same character. And so that's kind of where my head was at trying to think about this.
That's interesting because I kind of see what you're coming on from that, but how I view it normally is I tend to look at the lens of the writers who seemingly have runs on characters, or where they write characters, or when they portray characters in a way that I think specifically kind of catches people and sticks with people. I think is a good example. I think the Heath Ledger point you did it was a very good example of this happening outside of comics, but with an established character. Is Joker at that point, before The Dark Knight came out, was because of Jack Nicholson, because of the 60s show, and especially because of the animated series, was so in the public consciousness of this is what this character has to be, this is what this character should look like, this is what this character should sound like, that when Heath Ledger, the first photos start coming out, people start freaking out and they think he's going to do an awful job, etc., etc. And then he comes out, and what I think defines it, to me at least, when people really get it, and I think Heath Ledger's Joker is an example of getting it, is on a surface level, a lot of people will look at Heath Ledger's Joker, and I've had many conversations with people who do this, and think it's not comic accurate. And they think Heath Ledger's Joker is a radical departure. They think it's a re-envision. They think it's a new thing. Simply because it goes so comic accurate that it seems different than how other things are, right? Like Jack Nicholson, Mark Hamill's Batman animated series Joker, even some of the Arkham games, right? They are fantastic versions of that character, but they do not go as like animated series Joker is not an agent of chaos. Animated series Joker is not a nihilist. He does not think about Batman and has that conversation. It's not there. He's just a fun, well-written character version of the Joker, but he hasn't got that extra bit to him. Heath Ledger did that and brought that to the forefront, and so people went wild for it, and people knew it worked, and it still felt like Joker, but they can't really put their fingers on it. So that's what, to me, defines a really great take, is where they can get so close to the initial aspect of what the character was meant to be, what the core of the concept is. Why does this character exist? What is this character's purpose? That it almost seems revolutionary, even though it's just foundational. Another key example, Morrison's Superman. Everyone was like, what the fuck? Superman's punching cops. He's going around in a t-shirt and jeans, jumping around. He's doing all these different things. He said he's a socialist. What the? That's not my Christopher Reeve Superman. What is this? You go read those Golden Age comics. Morrison pulls panels, direct references from those Golden Age Siegel and Schuster comics. It's crazy how people like it. How that works, I think, is fascinating, and those are the ones I tend to lean to, and those are also the ones that never stick around.
And see, the interesting thing there, Alfie, is I think you're definitely right. For that's what creates a really powerful, really good take. But at the same time, I don't think that's what creates or what establishes a take, because it doesn't account for bad takes that tend to permeate and exist. So this would be your murder princess Wonder Womans, your psychotic I beat up the homeless to cope Batmans.
I don't have a side. Everyone is equal. Superman.
yeah, exactly. Like your fucking your Frank Miller Batman is a take on Batman that in a number of ways we are still dealing with in comics. Like, I'd like to think that King and Morrison kind of co-equally put that to bed and we don't need to go there anymore. But between Scott Snyder's metal craziness and whatever the hell else he plans to do with the character, and Zack Snyder's Murder Man versus Superman movie, I'm not sure we're entirely past the Frank Miller Batman take. But I mean, it is certainly a take that has permeated and existed. And then there's of course takes that like people are unable to get a character away from. Batman, of course, had this for a while. I'm trying to think of like other characters who have I hate to just stick around Batman characters, but the Riddler. The Riddler is a character who, you know, he's got such an image of being pathetic, of being like so lowly and useless, that anytime someone tries to do a take for him that's like got more of that hard edge to him, it can't stick. Like, no matter how good the story is. My favorite Riddler story is Riddle Me That, and I think it's a great direction for the character to go in that does make him a more like legitimate threat to Batman and stuff. But we only get like 2 stories with the Riddler using that take on the character before he just gets kind of forgotten and that goes by the wayside, and then it just kind of reverts back to, oh, isn't this guy a fucking loser? As like the default take.
Well, when do we go from a take to a reinvention, right? Like, I wouldn't call Heart of Ice a take on Mr. Freeze. I would call it like a complete total reinvention of the character. So like how far away from whatever the original source material was do we have to get before it's almost not even the same person? It's an entirely separate character, and it's not a take anymore. It's just, here is that name, that character, but completely done in a different way. Like, where does that line get drawn?
I think you can go pretty far. I think you can actually go a lot farther than some people would give credit for. I think you can go pretty far. Like the golden rule I would stick with is, before it becomes a different character, just kind of remember what the core tenets of it are. So we've seen it. Probably the most, I think you guys can agree as well, the most popular, we're doing a take on this character, but without actually naming them, this character is Superman, right? Is literal hundreds of these kind of Superman pastiches, where they use this thing because they want to comment on the superhero genre as a whole, and Superman's the best stand-in for that. And normally they tend to stick with the strong guy, superhero, bright, colorful costume, has a secret identity. Details other than that, like even morality, can kind of, I think that's when you start moving it away from being Clark Kent as like an alternative version, like a take on Superman, to just being a stand-in for that character, is when you lean the morality scale off. But if you keep those bits intact, you could make like Superman like a Cthulhu-esque alien from Krypton who doesn't even look human, and it would still be a Superman story if you stuck with the rest of the tenets of the rest of their thing, right? If Superman's just true form was that, or if you made Superman president of the United States, pretty drastic change, but works completely, right? There are ways you can still do that while keeping it the character, and then there are examples of like, you see like Homelander from The Boys, who is a Superman stand-in but completely different character. Versions like that, I think, are a good gauge if you as a writer want to do that and you want to know, all right, how far do I need to go? Is look at those. Look at how far it's pushed before it breaks, and it can be pushed pretty far, but there is definitely there is a limit. Sometimes people do forget that there is that limit. They just think, oh well, anyone can do anything. There is a limit before they become unrecognizable. It's a far off limit, but it definitely does exist, and the best creators know how to get right up close to it to tell the interesting stories.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those interesting things to see, like, what people do with characters and how they interpret them and misinterpret them. Like, I don't know about you guys, when I'm reading a comic, I can tell if someone actually likes this character or if they're here for a paycheck for a while until they can get to the characters they actually care about, you know? And that's always a really interesting kind of thing to read and see. I'm trying to think of good examples of that. I mean, I hate to say it, that's Wonder Woman. That's Wonder Woman for days. Like, constantly, people that don't give a fuck are put on her book. And just, yes, I like to slice people's heads off left and right is often the take they go with in the modern day, which is disappointing. So you get, like, the bad takes, and then you get the bad takes that stick so hard, like with Wonder Woman. Since mid 2000s, she's been stuck as Murder Princess, and that's disturbing on multiple levels, because the character's like legit created to be the exact opposite of what DC keeps trying to make her into. So and that's something I worry about is the way that, like, a bad take can stick and that just becomes the character.
Well, I mean, it's kind of like trying to take a character that is known for a certain thing and then trying to make them fit the mold of other characters, because you think, like, you look at like Frank Miller's Batman, who's like brutal and hardcore and awesome and everyone really loves him, And so they take a look at Wonder Woman and they're like, this is a little too nuanced and interesting. But what if she's more of like a Kratos, Thor, fucking murder the shit out of everyone type? Like, it's literally taking a character.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie. If they made a Wonder Woman game that was just a God of War clone in the mid 2000s, I would have played the fuck out of it.
Oh, for sure. But it's like a take on a character that only exists because a take on another character that's kind of related to that character is super popular. Like, you get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And I think
at least that's kind of how I almost view it in a sense, because I mean, I think that's what causes a lot of that, because they think that's what readers want.
Mm-hmm. It's one of those things where I actually do want to stick on this for a minute, because I think this is she's probably the biggest example of this. If you want to let's try and pinpoint why this is so popular, because it is popular. It does have its fans. Some writers who aren't just doing it for a paycheck genuinely believe this is how Wonder Woman should be. And the root of that, I think, all goes back to Kingdom Come. Kingdom Come was, I think, the first time we've seen Wonder Woman sword in hand in a mainstream, widely regarded DC comic book, where she's presented as the edgier one of the Trinity, the one of the Trinity who will take that stance where Superman and Batman won't do. That's how people kind of think, okay, that's how their dynamic works somehow. But like why that sticks and why that became so relevant is it is so much easier, sadly, to sell people, specifically young teenage boys, on buying the Wonder Woman comic if she is chopping people's heads off and she's the badass, kick-ass, I'm the one in the league who kills people, I'm that character, I'm the Xena warrior princess, than it is if it's the Wonder Woman comic where she's like here to help people and helping with therapy for an issue, right? Is like, we'll read that shit up, but like for the market base, that thing is specifically what the New 52 was trying to go for, which was like, we want to get the younger people on. That's what they go for. And again, it's one of those things where you don't need to ditch that, like the iconography of making the skirt armor, making everything the costume armor, and bringing that into heritage and making it Greek and God and all of that kind of thing. It's like, yeah, that's great, that's cool, that's a cool update. That makes this costume make sense now. It's not a spandex leotard. Like, it makes sense that Wonder Woman would wear that ceremonial garb. But like the moment you throw the sword in there, and especially that they keep the lasso on the back burner, as that's her iconic weapon. And it's meant to be. I have the same problem, and this is even more of a losing battle with Captain America. Is I don't like Captain America killing people. I don't like Captain America with a gun, and he has one all the time, because his signature unique gimmick is that his weapon is a shield. He is all defense. He is here to protect people. He is the idealized version of America going in and only self-defense. It's never the invader. It's never the aggressor. But no, they always give him a fucking machine gun or something, right? He's always got a side hip. He's always got a piece on him. And Wonder Woman's the same. I feel like they've both suffered the most because they have that soldier mentality. They have that thing I tapped onto them where they desperately... DC in vain is like, how do we make this work? How do we make this appeal? Batman, easy. He's in the darkness, and we all love Batman, but it is, out of the three, he's the one who gets the most Edge fans because he's the easiest to get there. And so the story of Superman, Wonder Woman, ever since Dark Knight Returns, really, because Superman used to just be on top, and that's where it kind of changed the game, is now Superman had to be as cool as Batman, whereas before Batman had to be as cool as Superman. The name of the game is still in that, is how can we make Superman and Wonder Woman work like Batman, and then that trickles down to everyone else, to where you get Harley Quinn. Oh, Deadpool's popular. Flash. Wally West was popular. Now Barry Allen has to be that. It's. I feel like those versions, the ones that we as a group at least, because they do have their fans, agree are the bad takes, are never really the case of a writer trying to put a take on a character because they're passionate about the history. It's trying to solve a perceived problem.
I mean, that's
trying to fix a character.
I mean, that's like, I'm not gonna act like I'm a fucking Green Arrow expert, but I've read a chunk of it, and then you watch Arrow and you're like, that's not really congruent with any fucking comic book take on Oliver Queen, at least broad strokes. And so it's like, you look at Arrow and I'm like, that's an Oliver Queen they're trying to sell as Batman. Like, that is a version of Green Arrow that they're trying to sell to Batman fans. I mean, one of the first big name villains he fights is Deadshot. Like, it's so odd to me that we're going to take a character who's so beloved for a certain thing, but the only way we can sell this and the only way we can get the budget to do it and the only way we can get anyone to sign off on it is if we make the character resemble an entirely different character. And so, I mean, that's incredibly pervasive everywhere, and it's frustrating for people who are like, oh, I'm a fan of Green Arrow, I want to watch Arrow. But if you go watch Arrow, you're not really going to get what you get from reading Green Arrow comics, at least not all the time. So it then becomes, to you as a fan, why the fuck am I even watching this? Why did they even make this if they're not even going to do the character? It's like, well, they had to sell it to the people who write the checks, and that's how they were able to sell it, by making it a Batman show. So yeah, I feel that.
And yeah, I'm trying to think of like people who came on and had just the take on the character that also just happened to take off and not be like a very good representation of them. Like that's something I'm trying to think if I can come up with an example for. Because Alfie, you're right. By and large, I do think it is mainly corporate trying to put a stamp on a thing. But I do feel like this happens just kind of on its own from time to time. That sometimes someone will just come out with something on a character and it won't really fit, but for whatever reason it catches on in a big way.
I think the biggest example I can think of, is Dan Slott on Spider-Man. Is Dan Slott and kind of Joe Quesada, because they kind of all, the big status quo shift in the Spider-Man books post One More Day was all of them, like, as creatives, not as like a business thing. They were all focused on, all right, this is how we're gonna, we want this Spider-Man in our books. We don't like the married Spider-Man. We don't like the adult Spider-Man. We want this version of Spider-Man. And it was all from a creative place. I don't think it was from a marketing place. It's Spider-Man. It's always going to sell gangbusters. Like, you can't fuck that up. And they've tried. So it's one of those things where they were like, okay, we want to make Peter Parker back to basics. He's living back with Aunt May. He doesn't have that much money. And he's not with Mary Jane, he's single, and we're going to try as hard as possible to make him a 15-year-old without de-aging him. So he's 25 acting like a 15-year-old, and that's stuck for 10 years plus.
Oof.
Yeah. Well, I'm kind of curious, since we're on Spider-Man real quick, let me ask you, because you have a little bit more of a history with the character than I do. Would something like, because at least to me, the lay person who's not super familiar with mainline Spider-Man comics, like, would something like the Alfred Molina Doc Ock be considered a take that has stuck? Because I look at Doc Ock in the only thing I really know pre that show, which is like the animated series, and then I look at the Alfred Molina Doc Ock, and then I look at like the Spider-Man video game Doc Ock. I even look at like Spectacular Spider-Man Doc Ock, how he's kind of more sympathetic and pathetic, and I feel like that's sort of a take that stuck, right? It's not like the specifics of that story didn't stick, of like the wife who died and whatever, but having a more sympathetic Doc Ock, just that idea is what kind of stuck post that movie. And I don't know if that was ever done before, but you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, they actually did do more sympathetic takes on Doc Ock prior to that, which is because Sam Raimi is such a a huge Spider-Man fan, especially the early stuff, right? That's why Venom is just not interested in. But like Doc Ock and Goblin were like he was geeking out. He was trying to get them both in the first movie because he was so much of like I want to do everyone, big one. So like Doc Ock has always kind of been. Before the accident, he's meant to be like what an adult Peter Parker who never got bit by the spider would have turned out to be. So kind of you meant to feel for him a little bit, but certainly they ramped up. But comic Doc Ock has never gone to where Melina did, where they like he's so like tormented and sympathetic. Like he's always kind of just an asshole, especially like you push it to the degree with like Superior and like stuff like that. So I can't say the most that had an effect on it, and I think maybe this is also an interesting thing, is that stuck the most visually. Is that forever changed how people drew Doc Ock with the trench coat and the changing the tentacles to look more distinctly robotic and throwing on the how he's plump, but he's kind of got that kind of like island god kind of sexy plump thing going on for like Alfred Molina's like he's a good looking guy, like he's got all of that thing going on. So there's stuff like they ditched the bowl cut for a bit. So I think that's the thing is like sometimes not even just writing wise, and these normally happen the most, is visual takes on the character. Is once a character is done like this, it sticks. Like people.
Oh yeah, I mean, if we're talking Spider-Man, Todd McFarlane, right?
Yeah,
like,
the webs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That dude changed the way Spider-Man's been drawn forever.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy how much of an effect Todd McFarlane had on the character. Shit, that's an interesting one to think of. I hate to say it, I hate to give the man credit for anything, but Shiver on Green Lantern changed the way Green Lantern is colored. He made the point once that like it always used to be colored like cloth, so like the black parts would be given a bunch of highlights, and like kind of light cascading off of it kind of things, and he did the innovation to make the black as it could be with just the bare minimum of highlights for muscle, and it just made the green pop so much more. And also he's a fucking jackass Nazi sympathizer, so fuck him anyway, but still he made the green look good. I'll give him that. There's shit like that. It's kind of crazy to think about designs on a character that really did just kind of go to another level.
I mean, like the Dark Knight Rises changed the way people look at Bane. I mean, there was even shortly after that movie came out, like even Bane in the comics started to get not necessarily the same mask, but like the weird like vest that he wore in that movie and stuff like that. Like you start to see those influences creep in. So like, and I'm not necessarily saying that's a bad thing or anything, but like that definitely happens. And I mean, even back in the day when 89 came out, I'm pretty sure Joker after that was drawn a little bit more like Jack Nicholson's Joker. But I mean, that was kind of a temporary thing. Whereas I feel like, we're in 2020 and the Harley Quinn show is still kind of jokingly making fun of the Bane voice and things like that. So like there are certain things that just like that's never going away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Bane was in that voice is really sticking for Bane like long term, because that was in the Lego Batman movie too.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Like that's never going away. And while I think the performance is interesting, it's just not how Bane sounds in my head. So it's just one of those things where I'm like, I don't love this, but I get why it's still here, because like it is a very
fake fan, Matt.
I know. I know it is, Effie. I know. But no, it's like it's a really interesting performance. I think it is. And so like I think that's part of it. I mean, how many people still think of like, why so serious? Like how many people still do that? Because like the performance is so iconic as part of that take on the character that sticks. Like people remember it so strongly for that one particular aspect, so like with Doc Ock, it's the visual design of him. For the Nolan villains, it's their particular delivery and mannerisms. that he was really kind of good at helping those actors come up with that really infused those characters with a lot of personality that made them stick for a lot of people.
And I think that's kind of the interesting thing is a lot of these takes, I think, tend to be influenced more by outside things as opposed to any one writer or artist in the stories they're working on. You know? Like, there are cases, like the Todd McFarlane thing we talked about, but so often it's trying to emulate other things that exist in the world. You know, when we're talking about the Wonder Woman thing, it's trying to emulate the kind of gritty, violent hero kind of thing that was popular in the mid 2000s. It's trying to go for that. When we talk about like the Superman getting evil every time is the only interesting thing you could do with him, it's because it's trying to emulate the success of Batman. Very rarely are like these fresh new takes on characters coming from the books themselves, coming from a shift in the narrative. And the interesting thing is that didn't used to be the case, right? Because like the Frank Miller Batman take came because of the comics. Like it's very like influenced by the gritty tough guy, kind of like Clint Eastwood type, Dirty Harry. Frank Miller's talked about that, but like it's more just Frank Miller thinking, well, I don't like the idea that I'm older than Batman, so I've got to make Batman older than me again. And just kind of going from there. And then there's just, I don't know, it's like Alan Moore did that with a number of things. Neil Gaiman did it. It's so interesting to me that we've moved away from the takes coming from the books themselves and kind of just doing this like weird copy of a copy thing.
I will say on the Dark Knight Returns thing, because I don't think that's entirely true. I don't think you get Dark Knight Returns if the 60s show didn't happen. The Dark Knight Returns is directly influenced of Batman. He remembered what Batman used to be like, and he didn't like the public perception of Batman, and that's why he starts off with like the progression of the costume in that book is why so many people who weren't comic fans got it, is because it's basically like, here's Adam West at 50, and then it progresses and it gets darker and darker throughout the book, and then it gets more epic and mythic throughout the book as well. So I think that was very much a cultural zeitgeist of Batman in the public eye as well, that was influenced by a lot of other things, but certainly not to the extent where you could just point like these things nowadays, where you could point to a movie and be like, that's where that thing came from. Like after Batman 89 came out, Batman had the all black suit with the yellow oval in the books as well. Like stuff like that wasn't happening back then as well. I think another key thing which I think applies to Miller as well is Miller. This might be the most permanent out of every single other one we've ever talked about and will ever talk about for some reason, is Miller changed Daredevil forever. Miller making Daredevil Catholic and just how he did that book has changed that character fundamentally and has almost made that character. Is that Daredevil prior Miller is effectively a different person. A completely different kind of character. That's why I like the Wade version, where it like kind of combines the best of the Lee version prior to before we get, and like the Romita Senior prior to before we get to Miller, and like injecting a bit of both. But definitely Daredevil is probably the one who lends himself most, because he is a more niche character to just complete reinvention with takes. But at the same time, I don't think there is really a difference between a reinvention and a take, as long as you, again, I'm making it distinctly this is still the same character. as long like he's still blind, he's still Matt Murdock, he's still the lawyer, he's still got all these things to him. It's just they honed in on what extra things you can add to that to make that story more potent. So that's why this might be more controversial, because I know, Ian, you were talking about why don't takes last? Why do we move on after why is it there's such a fear? And I've been seeing this on Twitter a lot as well, is there are a lot of fans who are scared when they're enjoying something, which is a horrible feeling to be in, and it is a shame that we've come there. Is that when they're enjoying a run, they are more preempted with like, how are they gonna forget this happened? How are they gonna ignore this run and this take on the character going forward? Than they are enjoying the take in the moment, because they're so used to decisions made in other books being ignored later on by other writers. And as much as I sympathize with that, and as much as I do get that, and as much as I have had characters I love who have just been completely ditched and thrown to the wayside because other writers just aren't interested in them. Like even this is like I'll fully be fair to everyone, I will slate Grant Morrison for a second. There's like, Grant Morrison really should have included Cassandra Cain in his fucking Batman run. Kind of salty. Like she got fucked over hard by that. But like it's one of those things, right? Is like sometimes writers just aren't into those characters, and as much as I like, damn you, they should have featured them. I think the if we can ever get to a dreamlike state where a writer is just, all right, you're on the book, tell your story, how many ever issues, 20, 50, 100, whatever, you're gone. New boy, fresh slate, do what you want. That is how I think the pinnacle of comics will be. That's how I think people will get into them more, and that's why I think the characters will be better served. I almost feel like, because we have to keep doing cleanup, and are we going to keep this bit? Are we going to change this bit? And it's so infrequent, and writers, especially nowadays, barely get a start before they're thrown into an event, or they get thrown off the book into something else, or they've got editorial limits. It's really hard to get like a grasp of what a writer's trying to say. And my biggest example I'll do is Nightwing. Tom King, big writer in comics. This is probably the book that made his name. And Tim Seeley came in with Grayson, completely changed the game of how Dick Grayson's supposed to be written. Completely tried to reinvent and change the character. And the book was sounding good. They had that forward traction. Rebirth comes in. They send in Nightwing. Tim Seeley's on the book. You think, okay, so he's the writer on the book. He gets to make all the calls. Jeff Johns phones him up. I want you to bring back Bloodhaven, and I want you to bring back all the Chuck Dixon villains. But Mr. Johns, I don't want to do that. No, this is Rebirth. We're bringing back all the old stuff people liked. But I don't want to do that. Well, it's not your choice. And that's the state of comics. That's the biggest indicators is that Nightwing, super popular character, right? Like even for someone who hasn't had a live action movie debut, like he's been in Titans now, but that's like super recent. But Nightwing's fucking popular. Yet for some reason, barely a year out after that take, we're back to Chuck Dixon Nightwing comics.
Yeah, I mean, is there a fear that you hit a take that's so popular that they're just afraid to move past it and to try, like, a take that sticks around that's not necessarily a bad take, but it's so popular that just everyone's afraid to try to push past it, and even to the point where, okay, we're kind of spinning our wheels with this character. We need to move on, and we need to legitimately do something to reinvigorate or freshen up the character or look at them from a slightly different angle. But the powers that be are afraid of it.
Yeah, this is where you get into like the Superboy Prime stuff, right? Where it's like, no, you're ruining it all. Kind of shit.
That's precisely it, because I think that's also another problem. Is I think a lot of the times this is on the fans. I think the fan culture of this doesn't match up with this comic I liked from the 90s. You're ruining my version of the character. How dare you? kind of attitude that is so prominent in comics and kind of exclusive to comics, because like you said Ian at the start of this video, it's such a unique medium where you can have propagating takes, is for some reason, and I think this is even bigger with Marvel fans, because Marvel caters to them a little bit more with the idea that this is all one long story, that, yeah, this is the same Peter Parker, that every writer just writes the same character, and it's all the event of one person's life, from Amazing Spider-Man issue 1, Amazing Fantasy 15 even, to where we are now. It's all one story, and it's all meant to be viewed as one person's life. So that means any outliers, anything that's too different, anything that's too changed, bad. You are ruining my version of the character because this doesn't match up with this comic from the 80s, which was really bad, but for some reason everything counts, so now you have to accept this. And that's why I think fandom really needs to kind of get out of their own ass and accept that these aren't real people. Like, yes, Dick Grayson may have said that in 2004. He's like, right? Like, why does this get brought up all the time? Why do characters' actions like, and it becomes like such a big defending thing that almost it's the snake eating its own tail, right? It's like, I don't think Batman should be killing people. Is like,
yes.
Wow, Batman doesn't kill in the comics. Well, Batman did kill in the comics. It's like, well, he said in this issue that he didn't do that. Well, in this issue, that's an Elseworld story. Well, it still was published by DC Comics, wasn't it? And they're having like a back and forth fight. And I'm here like, well, I don't care what the fucking other writer said. I personally wouldn't write him that way, is my thing. And that's what I think is such a weird version with these takes. I'm so curious to see what you guys is. Where is the fandom distinction where they don't even believe that takes are a thing? They just believe you have to write a character this way.
I think that's like a very immature thing. I don't want to say young thing, because I know like guys in their 40s that have this, right? Like, I think it's just a very immature thinking on a thing, and it doesn't leave room for any kind of creativity. Because sometimes I do like it when someone comes on a character and has like this fresh new way of interpreting them. I think that's fun sometimes to see. And you know, I tend to prefer that as opposed to like setting up the side character that's really the main character of that writer's run. That's the thing that happens a lot. Like Wade right now is doing a Doctor Strange book. And so his first volume of it, I'll say, because technically it's renumbered and it's a whole fucking thing. It's comics. His first volume of it was like, okay, Doctor Strange dealing with sci-fi. Doctor Strange in space. And I'm like, yep, I'm here for it. That's an awesome idea to see how Doctor Strange deals with the technological side of the world, because he's such like a magic and sorcery dude. And now the second volume of that book, of that run, is Doctor Strange Surgeon Supreme. Doctor Strange has his hands back, and he's able to do surgeries again, which is like a complete reversal from the entire point of the character, but in a really fun, creative way. Because I was like, all right, well, I've got like this responsibility to be the Sorcerer Supreme. I can't give up on that. But also, I did take a Hippocratic oath that I would help people with my surgical skills. So I guess I got to go be a surgeon now too. And it's a fun thing. He's got like a secretary that he works basically for free, except that he gets 2 questions per day about all the superhero bullshit. I love
He's got a ghost dog.
Yeah, and a ghost dog.
I think
so like that's a fun, unique interpretation. But I guarantee you, there's someone, if I go troll the fan boards and stuff, there's someone who like, this completely negates the point of Doctor Strange. Stephen Strange lost his hands in an accident and is never going to be able to use them again. But now, because Mark Fail over here decides that he can just do whatever the fuck he wants with the comic books. Oh, well, now he's got his hands back. What is this? A book about magical fairy bullshit?
I'll open a slight can of worms here. Now, I don't know if this fully counts as a take, but it is something that has that very what you just said reminded me of this. But Ruin Johnson fucked up Luke Skywalker.
Yeah.
That is one of those things where I'm just like, Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi, he's the most interesting that character has ever been, bar none. I don't want to hear any other word on it, straight up. But then there's for a lot of people, it's so at odds with what their mental image of the character is that it like their brain is short circuiting. And there's a legitimacy to that in a sense, right? I mean, you grew up with this character, you know this character, you interpret this character in a very certain way that's almost personal to you. It's like a fingerprint, everyone looks at a character in a certain way. And so then you have this beloved character who's been around for a long time. You make a sequel or you make an adaptation or you make a what have you, and you approach the character from a very unexpected place, even if that place makes perfect fucking sense, then it's like they just can't handle it. And I don't want to just say they're emotionally immature people, even though a lot of them are, but like that's kind of the one that comes to mind when you're talking about like that specifically, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Now, I mean, like, the interesting thing about Luke Skywalker is, yeah, he's a character from just the films, right? But of course, that's not really it. There's this whole like 20 years of extended canon and stuff with Luke Skywalker being Space Jesus, which was totally uninteresting. There's only one Space Jesus in this household, and it's Kyle Rayner. Thank you very much. But like Luke Skywalker just going out and like, oh yeah, I can do Force lightning, but it's white because it's from the good side. And
Electric judgment.
Yeah, exactly. God. Just like the you had like, and I don't have any problem per se with that particular interpretation of Luke Skywalker. I don't think it's very interesting. I don't think it really fits because Luke isn't the chosen one. He's the son of the chosen one, and he's kind of pathetic. Like, what's the best feat Luke has is like killing a fucking wampa or some shit when you look at the movies themselves.
Oh yeah, I mean he kills the
Then he goes off
Rancor.
and becomes. Yeah, okay, fair. He kills the rank, but not even with the Force. He crushes it with a goddamn door.
Like you could have had him use the Force to push the button. Like you could have like just something. Like, I don't know, make that a little cooler.
A skull at
this
the
is why.
button.
This is why you would both fail your training. A Jedi uses the Force for knowledge and defense.
Knowledge and defense, never attack. I know. Thank you.
No, but like seriously, like Luke Skywalker isn't some fucking like Chad Force user.
No,
that's what the extended universe turned him into for a long time. From the very little I have read, to be fair, I'm sure there's some stuff that dealt with it in perhaps a more nuanced way. But so like that is a take on Luke Skywalker, and then Ryan Johnson comes around and he has a very different take on Luke Skywalker, who is kind of a whiny little bitch. In the original trilogy, and then he, like, things go wrong for him somewhere between episode 6 and 7, and he goes off and does what kind of a whiny little bitch would probably do, run away from his problems, because he doesn't have anyone there to hold his robot hand anymore. And I don't know, I like that interpretation more, certainly, but I can understand why it's so alienating to people, but it doesn't make it in and of itself bad because it's alienating you. Speaking on that note, here's one. Doctor Who.
Hello.
Takes on the Doctor are plentiful, and Stephen Moffat has like 50 of them.
He's got one that just evolved over time.
Sure. Let's go with that one. But no, like that's an interesting thing because as harsh as I'll be on the people that don't like Ryan Johnson's Luke Skywalker, I kind of get it in a way because I really don't like a lot of what Moffat eventually ended up doing with the Doctor by the time he got to Capaldi, right? Like I don't like his interpretation of the Doctor in the form of the 12th Doctor. I don't like a lot about what was done with the Doctor in that era. There's just a number of choices that irk the shit out of me and made the show really, really unenjoyable. I'm not going to say it was wrong. I'm not going to say that there's not some kind of justification for it or there isn't some nuance to it. But, like, I do think you can have a take that does get so alienating that it just makes it unenjoyable for people to watch. If they aren't on board with the take, you can go, like, so far with it that it just turns people off. That would... If more people complaining about The Last Jedi had, like, that thing, like, technically it's a fine choice. I just don't like it. I'd be much more sympathetic to listen to them, because that's how I feel with, like, with Capaldi's Doctor.
Mm-hmm. And what I think is good about that is I think that is a good thing to say, so that we're being, like, objective and, like, well, we're not just talking about the stuff we like as good and everyone else's things that they don't like as bad. It's just we're talking about the principle of the take. And I will say as well, is like, Capaldi's my favorite Doctor. The 12th Doctor is my favorite, but I am very glad that they pushed him that far to get there to become my favorite, even if that's meant it would be more alienating for you, Ian, because I'm like, okay, yes, the writer had the freedom to say what they wanted to say, and this is how the art is viewed by different people, right? And that's like a merit to me of, like, even if people don't like it, as long as there's enough there to, like, we could have a conversation about that, right? And that's the thing, is there's enough meat on that because they went in a direction, because they had a thing to say with that character. And you can agree with that, you cannot agree with that. But the writer is using the opportunity to say something with that character, using the medium to express their personal view, something only they could have wrote, because they're not imitating anyone, they're doing their stamp on it. And that's why, again, I think is the old adage of, like, I will forever be more interested in fascinating failures than average successes. Is like, you, as long as someone's just given the free reign to go as balls to the walls as they want, even if it crashes and burns, I don't care, because, like, at least they tried it, right? I think that's why, even if I don't like these things, there's a reason why people are still talking about BVS to this fucking day.
Yeah, and that's the problem, is that's where you get, like, your fucking BVSs. It's like, oh, it's Zack Snyder's, like, super dramatic interpretation of these characters. But then you get your fucking sad murder Superman.
Yeah, man. But, like, I don't care, because, like, even if I get that, it doesn't affect me personally. Because it's fucking, I don't have to watch.
Doesn't it though? Doesn't it though? Like, aren't you still dealing with, like, oh yeah, Superman shouldn't wear trunks, they're too stupid.
I've been dealing with that since
yeah, Superman does kill people left and right.
That's the problem though, I think, is, again, leads to, that is not, I don't think that's a problem with the art, that's a problem with the immaturity of people dealing with the art. And the only way you can wean that out of people is by getting more versions like that. Not obviously of that quality, but, like, just, again, having the opportunity to just give them that free reign. And again, even if it's not something I like, even if I despise it, I need to believe that that's the way, because that's the only environment I as a creator can thrive in. That's the only environment that anyone else, I think, can do their best work. Is when they have that free reign just to say something. Is like, yes, you're right, Ian. Because of that, I got Injustice, I got BVS, I got fucking Doomsday Clock. The list goes on of bad Superman stories. But you know what else? I got fucking All-Star out of that, so I don't care. I'm fucking one.
I don't know, man. Like, that's to me where you get to a really dangerous thing. I like the opportunity for that to exist, but I don't always find, spectacular failures to be as interesting as mediocre successes. Because, like, what was that fucking trilogy of cartoon Batman things that were basically just an extended toy commercial we reviewed? Batman Unlimited. Yeah. Batman Unlimited is 100% a mediocre success. I will watch all 3 of those movies a billion more times before I ever watch BVS again.
But
And I don't even own those movies.
Yeah, but
I
Ian,
own
you've
BVS.
talked more about BVS than you ever will about those three movies. You may not enjoy it, but it has been giving you more intellectual stimulus as a piece of media than those three ever will. So, like, yes, you found a more effective way to waste your fucking time, but you want to be smart, boy, Ian, and talk with me. It is one of those things where that's what appeals to me. Again, man, you like those are bad. They've got a fucking I don't even say the average successes. They got Batman and transforming robot dog. That's infinitely more interesting. The thought process behind that than anything in BVS. But it's about having. It's about being able to use these characters in this medium. To risk it, to be able to take those chances on people, because again, man, that's how like Morrison. I want to go back to Morrison because he's the one that I think is the safe space, right? Morrison, when he was pitching JLA, had to fight to get the big seven Justice League characters on it. DC kept telling this is not going to sell. You can't have Superman on it. You definitely can't have Batman on it. Batman doesn't even interact with the Justice League anymore. He's talking about Atlantis, even though he's supposed to be friends with Aquaman. Like, there's like that period of Batman comics is like, no, he can't be on the fucking moon. That's silly. You can't have all these big characters together. That's not going to work. Morrison's like, no, just let me try. Just if it fails, kick me off the book. Just let me try. And he's like, all right, fine. There you go. That Justice League as an entire enterprise changed forever. How we view the Justice League and what a Justice League book should be changed forever because of Morrison, because he took that risk. So yes, you do get damaging versions of that. Because they said, Mark Waid, go ahead, make Wonder Woman use a sword and kill people. We've been dealing with that for decades since. I'm sorry. So it's necessary.
It's a double-edged sword.
Because then, funny stuff. But like, well, because of that, we also got Alex Ross propelling to stardom because they took that chance. So like, you're right. It is a double-edged sword, budding ting. But at the same time, it's like, man, you gotta take it. I personally feel anyway.
Yeah. I mean, I get it. On like as much as it backfires, though, there are occasions where I'm glad we have people like Jeff Johns who are like, no, the toys need to be put in the toy box. You need to play with them in this way. Like that's Jeff Johns' whole fucking career.
I know.
Summed up right there. And I, like as annoying as it can be sometimes because of your Sealies, it can also be helpful sometimes. Because of your stuff like Green Lantern, because when you just stick with the take and you just go with it and you don't try to reinvent it left and right every single time, you can get cool shit out of it.
Even then, right, is he had the fucking pull to be like, why don't they, what if there's other colors? And changed Green Lantern stories forever. If they were like, no, it has
but he didn't get to start that way.
Exactly right.
Like, he had to start it out. He had to start it out at a certain point, and that's the thing is, it gets complicated. But like sometimes that editorial hand is really necessary because it saves things from getting just like awful at times. I feel like that's the thing is the editor's job is truly an unsung one because it saves the writer from making drastic mistakes that they're probably really caught up on in the moment. And on occasion, that backfires too, because you get your fucking for one more days or whatever, like or what, the examples of like the editorial mandate that mars a character for years, things like that. It's a complicated, it's a give and take. There's good sides and bad sides to all of it, but I don't know. On occasion, I just wish the spectacular failures weren't so spectacular. It's like, Alpha, you're probably right in the most technical of senses, which as a lawyer, I'm sure you're just over the fucking moon about. But, yeah, but at the same time, there's a limit for me. There's a really hard limit where it, like, you can go way too far with it. And sometimes I wish people would just like this is the problem. This is the problem a lot of things have. Like, I used to think this was unique to philosophy where where all the seminal works on philosophy are guys trying to say, okay, everything that came before me was garbage. I'm going to tell you the only thing you need to know. I am going to end philosophy. And then, like, everyone talks about that for, like, 200 years, and then the next guy comes along and it's like, everything before me was trash. And it's just it repeats in a cycle in that way. But like, I feel like this happens all the fucking time with shit, where people just come on and like, all right, all the books before this were garbage, throw them away. Your Wonder Woman #1 that's worth $9 billion, throw it in the fucking trash because Marston didn't know what the hell he was talking about. Here's Wonder Woman with her big-ass Buster Sword. Murder Princess is going to be her new name.
If Wonder Woman had a
like,
Buster Sword,
Yeah, that'd be amazing.
I'd buy those books.
Yeah, hell yeah.
I mean, that's your fucking Scott Snyder right now with his Wonder Woman chainsaw sword.
I mean, that's pretty fucking baller, though, right? Like, at least that's the thing I take it, right, is I'm like, that's why I do like having your Scott Snyders, because I think it's a good example of what I'm talking about. Is like, Scott Snyder, by and large, isn't mind-blowing as a writer. His paneling isn't there. His dialogue doesn't normally hit that well, and it's all of that.
Everyone's got a college degree.
Yeah, but like what I like about that, right, is he thinks very similar to me, where it's just like, why does this have to be? What? Let's make this the craziest fucking version of this possible, right? Let's push it to the thing. Is like, oh, Wonder Woman, a death metal thing. Oh, she's got a sword. No, she's got a chainsaw of truth. Yeah, that's the kind of shit like I'm here for, right? And that's good because it's pushing something with the character, but that's an example of where you push it so far, it kind of circles back to being, okay, it's better than the sword because at least it's creative and it's fun and it's meant to be something different, right? Rather than just, again, with the sword, it's like playing it straight. It's like so self-serious about it. But if you give her fucking bazookas and shit, then it's immediately hilarious. So people know it's not going to try and stick. What people do with the really self-serious, like ultra thing takes with like Wonder Woman specifically, is they're determined for this to stick. And thankfully, it hasn't. Kind of, we're losing the grip, but like the Zeus thing is kind of being wrestled back and forth. We had a conversation with this in the Discord, but like there are
so goddamn complicated.
Right. But like it doesn't need to be, and I think that has to do as well with the fandom thing we've talked about before, as we've gotten more and more into this generation, where it does seem like this is the comic fans writing comics now. Those takes are starting to seep in. Jeff Johns, I think, is the biggest example where he's like, I want to bring in all the stuff I used to read. I want to bring in things where I was like, to the point where in Doomsday Clock, he's just like, all right, you know, the Earth that everyone wanted, like the 1970s DC. Yeah, that's just the Earth now. That's just an Earth that exists, and I wanted to make sure that's there. There you go. The JSA and the Legion of Superheroes, they're here now. They're here because I wanted it. Like, and I'm like, okay, I respect it, right? You wanted to bring in your toy box. You want to play with those things. Go for it. It's your choice. But I think that's one of those things where once we have that kind of nostalgia view of these characters, that's what I think limits the takes, because you get so many writers who are just aping what someone else did. Like, you'll have so many writers who are just, oh, I just write, like Kevin Smith talks about this at the time. He's like, oh, I just write Denny O'Neil Batman. Like, I just want to write how I imagine Morrison spoke, because that's how I like that. And like, that's great. I think that's really good for young writers. That's helped me a lot. Just being able to base my takes off other writers. I think that's very fundamental. But if you're like in the big leagues of comic books and you're doing your own thing, I think you almost owe it to yourself to have a take, to branch yourself out there and like, okay, what is the only thing I can say about this character? Because if we're just wasting our time reading these books anyway, right, you might as well say something fucking personal with it, because anyone else can write a Batman story, but only you can write your Batman story, if that makes any sense. And that's why I think people should have that freedom, because that's the only time we're going to get those more seminal classics. I don't think there is a single well-regarded classic Batman story, for me at least, that wasn't made, and you read it and you can feel the person through it.
Right. I mean, that's why you look at like you take like Tom King's Batman and the Batman Universe book, both Batman stories that are being published around about similar time frames, and they're both perfectly valid. Just yep, that's Batman, but they're dramatically different. Like the take on the character almost is designed to fit the tone of whatever world and whatever story they're telling. Tom King's Batman a lot of times feels like this very personal take on the character, whereas Batman Universe is this much more fun, lighthearted adventure that kind of harkens back to a different time. And it's good that there's room for both of those things, because as soon as you start saying this character can only be written this one way, and that's the take that is the only take that matters, then you're missing out on so much great material on whatever character it is, whatever universe it is, what have you. I mean, that's something that a lot of fans struggle with. They don't want to read Tom King's Batman because it's not their Batman. And there's a validity to that for sure. I get that. Because, I mean, I have that for sure. I mean, I grew up on Paul Dini's Batman in the animated series. That will always inform what I think Batman should and should not be. But that doesn't mean I'm not open to other people's interpretations, even if it's a slight change off of what my own interpretation is. It's still something different, and you have to be open to that if you really want to be a fan of this character long term and not just make yourself miserable.
I think that's fair. Again, I still think there's something to be said for just like not trying to rock the boat, just trying to tell a story that just fits and works and is fun, and not having to have it be... Because, like, I love Batman, but at the same time, Morrison came on the book in 2006, so for the last, 10 to 15 years, we've been just dealing with, like, seminal works on Batman where everyone's trying to, like, make the point, have, like, the definitive take on the character, and two of them end up, like, all of them end up being kind of similar, so I guess it all works out in a way, but, like, there's just no room for, like, alright, and this week Batman's just doing his thing. It's in the middle of these fucking, like, monumental runs that require, like, you have to have your webpage open so you can figure out what this page is referencing half the time.
I mean, that's why I liked Brian Michael Bendis's the Batman Universe book, because I started reading it. I was just like, oh, cool, Riddler's doing some shit. Let's go fight the Riddler. Yay, this is fun. Like, I'm like, if everyone is just
refreshing,
if everyone is just like, I'm going to deconstruct the character. I'm going to deconstruct the character. I'm going to, like, one of our conversations, you said something that stuck with me. They're like, when was the last time Batman fought when was the last time someone in Batman did a themed crime? Like, it's just, let's go kill, like, let's attack Batman. Let's break him down. Let's break the bat. It's like, it's tiresome. It's tiresome. And so, like, when everyone is trying to have the next great take on a character, you can't just let the character breathe and have a fun story. So I feel that very strongly. I mean, that's how I feel about it for sure, because reading Batman Universe, when I finally got around to it, was, like, really refreshing, because I was just like, oh, well, this is nice. And I'm not saying Tom King's stuff was bad, but, like, it's nice it's just nice to stop the Riddler. It's nice to do some good. So.
And what I think about that is, I don't want to... was when I say letting the freedom for the creative to have the take, right? That's part of it. Is a lot of restrictions get made, is you have to make an arc. This can't be creators have to fight for one shots, because a lot of DC is like, well, you've got to have a cliffhanger. You got to make sure you got the thing so we can put it in the trade, right? Like the comic books have moved from one shot storylines to arcs by a necessity. And if you're telling arc-based storylines, like, you kind of have to make that all connect as one if you're a good writer, because that's how you make it all cohesive as a piece. And that's why I think actually you look at something like for King, how King's done Superman, and I would argue is just as a definitive this is Tom King's Superman as his Batman. Entirely what you guys want, right? Is it's just his Superman up and away is it's framed with a narrative, right? But every issue is effectively its own one shot. Everything, and the same with Bendis is how he approaches Superman. He's doing the big arcs, but in his Batman universe book, it's just single narrative, but one shot story. But it's still very much this is his stamp, this is his take, and I think that's part of it as well. That yes, people shit on Tom King a lot, very unfairly, when they're like, Tom King self-inserts in his books. Why does Tom King have to make every character talk about war and his own experiences? I don't like it. I was just like, that's a sign of a good writer if they're putting themselves in the story, because that's how you know it's real. That's how you get the emote. That's how Tom King makes us all cry, because it's literally he's putting his own feelings in the ink. But once we've got the one shots and everything, letting creators do that, I think is important, because if that existed, right, if more people had the opportunity to do it, you would see it. I 100% say there are some creatives like Kurt Busiek, Mark Waid, Greg Rucka even, who just want to do that, but they can't because of how the comic book medium is set up. Jonathan Hickman's a big proponent of this as well. He's famous for his giant arcs, but he's been like, I don't want to be typecast as that, but they keep making me, well, if you're on a book, you got to do 50 issues. That's what they know you're for. Is like, so I think that's part of it. I think that is an editorial limit on creators that stops takes. That's why Batman got that so often, is because DC knew Batman works really well when you give him these big long creatives on long runs with long arcs, because it's sold. Batman the one shot stories weren't doing as great. So I think that is in itself a limit. The fact that they are forced almost to make these big long takes. Not every creative would want to do that as their stamp.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's a whole thing. I think we are moving further and further away from the takes on a character, and we're starting to get into industry again. And we are at about the wrap-up point. Does anyone have anything else they really want to make sure we cover before we close out the episode here?
I think it's interesting how, like, a lot of people's issue with the BVS take on Batman, for example, if you can like boil it down, like one of the big issues is that Batman kills. Well, Batman kills in the Burton films, but a lot of Batman fans, including myself, still really enjoy those because it ticks all the other boxes for us. And so I think sometimes how much you as a consumer enjoy a take, I think it's not exactly just it's a collection of these factors that, like, how many of the factors of the things that I like about this character exist in this take, and how many of the things don't exist in this take of the character but aren't as important to me personally. And I think that's like part of where it gets into if you like a take or not, and I think that's always interesting to think about.
Sure, definitely. Okay. Well, let's see here. Whose week is it? Is it Alfie or Matt? I honestly can't remember.
I think it's Matt, because I did the Superman movie last time.
Okay. Matt, what are we going to be discussing next time? We need a review topic. So.
I'm debating between a Conan the Barbarian short story or Batman Gotham Knight. Yeah, we're going to talk about Batman Gotham Knight.
All right, cool. See you there for that next week, everyone. Until then, I'm the Philosopher.
I am the champion of the oppressed.
I'm the Sonic Erotica lover.
And we are your Geeky Gentlemen, and we will be discussing things.
Oh, yeah!